Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the podcast. My name is Stephanie Marie, and I'm on a mission to spread hope, sharing people's stories to encourage, inspire, and empower you. Today, I'm so excited to welcome Markie Pasternak to the show. Markie is a mental health advocate and senior manager of higher education at Active Minds, which is the nation's leading nonprofit for youth and young adult mental health. Active Minds is now in over 1,000 colleges and universities, and also in K-12 schools, workplaces, and communities. Markie's work focuses on designing and leading mental health advocacy programs for college students and building partnerships across higher education to advance campus-wide change. Namely, Markie leads a national virtual leadership program called the Mental Health Advocacy Institute that trains students from over 70 campuses each year to identify pressing mental health challenges in their communities and develop actionable plans to address them. She is especially committed to helping students turn their lived experiences and passion into meaningful, sustainable impact. So without further ado, let's begin. Hello, Markie. Thank you so much for joining the show. I'm so excited to have you here with us today.
Hi, Stephanie. It's wonderful to be here. Thank you for having me representing Active Minds as a guest.
I've been involved with Active Minds. My friend had actually started Active Minds on our campus when I was at Pace University. And I seen like how thriving it was on campus and the work that they were doing. And also I'm speaking at Active Minds. I stayed in touch with my community, and I'm actually speaking at Active Minds next week to a group of students. So I love everything Active Minds does. So I'm so excited to have you here today. Thank you.
And thanks for having me. It's wonderful to hear you have a personal connection to the organization, because I really do think Active Minds has touched so many lives of college students and folks in K through 12 now. That's They're just young adults in general. So just having an example of that as the podcast host is phenomenal and gets the point across, right? So I'm very excited to be here and excited for this interview.
Thank you, Markie. It really is. I mean, the community that it builds, like just having similar minded folks together, talking about it, reducing stigma, openly starting those communications. I mean, I've seen the power of that and how it really creates like a ripple effect across campus. A lot of people feel, especially a lot of students, they feel shy to talk about those things. They feel like, oh, I'm the only one dealing with that. I can't really share my struggles, and my professors or the admin there. So they feel kind of shy to talk about those things, or they feel like they're the only one struggling. And so I think that, starting those conversations is so important, So I really just love everything Active Minds is doing. And so can you tell us about your journey, how that led you to where you are today, and why the conversation surrounding mental health is especially meaningful for you?
Well, I live with OCD. So that's my big connection to mental health, is having diagnosed OCD. And I think for me, the conversation around mental health is so important because it wasn't being had in my community and in my family growing up. And so I wasn't diagnosed with OCD until I was 17, but I struggled with it from the age of 8. And so there was 9, almost 10 years there of suffering in silence, not understanding what was going on in my own brain or why life was difficult in certain ways for me, that it didn't seem to be difficult for other people, and not really understanding how much of an impact like mental health had on my own life, and expanding that definition of what mental health was. And then in addition to that, I had friends deal with mental health issues growing up as well. One of my good friends struggled with depression and suicide. And her journey, I think, really made me have a stake in the game of mental health before I even knew I had a problem. So it was like being an advocate for her and being a support system for her made me really invested in mental health. But then I was so surprised finding out like what I had been struggling with was OCD and mental health, and that it was a mental health issue versus, I don't know what I thought it was. I don't think I had the words for it when I was a kid. Exactly what was going on. But once you look up online and you see, the symptoms of OCD, right? To me, it was like, oh my gosh, are they in my head? Like they know everything I'm going through. My deepest life struggles are just typed out on this webpage telling me what OCD is, what is happening. Wow. So that was my teenage years, but then really going into Active Minds and how that comes into my life is I've been involved with Active Minds for a really long time now. I actually was also a student in Active Minds, and I got involved my freshman year of college because I was so excited and just on fire for mental health advocacy at the age of 18. That's really when I started calling myself like, I'm going to be an advocate. I love advocacy, specifically with mental health. And when I go to college, I'm going to make this my focus. And so got involved with Active Minds my first semester at Marquette University. in Milwaukee, and got involved on a national level as well, and sat on our student advisory committee, and was the president of our student advisory committee in 2015, 2016, was on the board of directors for Active Minds as a student. And so, served in the organization in many capacities. Then I decided to get master's in higher education and student affairs, where I went to Indiana University, Bloomington for that degree, where they did not have an Active Minds chapter, but there are different times throughout my career. I worked at other mental health organizations and volunteered other places, NAMI, Bring Change to Mind, some other ones, in my career. Yeah, but really always went back to Active Minds with things, and then advised the Active Minds chapter during my first job at Auburn University down in Alabama.
Wow.
So, and then now work for them full time. So I think I was really empowered as a student with my own journey that I wanted to give that back to other students as I marched forward in my career. So when I identified at 17, it was like, I am a mental health advocate. I don't know what this holds in life for me, but it's going to be part of my identity. It wasn't too long after that, when I was, a freshman in college, I heard a speaker at my school came in for Mental Health Awareness Week and talked about storytelling, and story sharing is a really powerful tool for advocacy. If she's listening, her name was Sue McKenzie. She worked at Rogers Health in Milwaukee, and she talked about how your story is like a gemstone. She made that metaphor, and she said, each of your stories is precious. It is a gemstone, and you can choose what to do with it. It's beautiful in its own way. It might radiate different colors and shine and light depending on what the story is or what angle you're sharing the story from. But it's ultimately your responsibility to decide if you want to hold it and keep it for yourself in a little jewelry box at night to look at and admire, or if you want to wear it out in the world and show it off to others and impact others with that story. And so I think when we have the courage to share our gemstones with others, and of course in an intentional way, right? I wouldn't wear $1,000 diamond ring hiking at a national park because I might lose it. But I think if you're being intentional about how you're sharing your story, that can really provide hope for other people when they need it. I think having the courage to do that and say, yeah, this is really precious to me, but I'm going to offer it to you because I know that it's going to make an impact on you, is one of the most generous things we can do when it comes to sharing hope.
That's awesome. I mean, I love how you've been connected for so long. I mean, that's incredible. I mean, I think it just goes to show like how connected the community is, and people that join it, it's like they want to keep going with it because it's just so amazing. So for people that, don't know about Active Minds, you start a chapter on your campus. So like, for example, let's say if someone's listening, how to get started with their programs, their initiatives. Can you just kind of like walk us through how did it expand across the nation as it does today? All these schools that Active Minds partners with. So walk us through that.
Of course. Well, we'll start with just how Active Minds was founded. So Active Minds was established as a nonprofit organization in 2003 by our founder, Allison Melman, following the tragic suicide of her only sibling, Ryan Melman, who at the time of his passing was a student at Columbia University. And so Allison took her grief and her own personal, experience and channeled it into creating Active Minds. And it started as a student organization on her campus. Then her friend at Georgetown University thought it would be a fantastic asset to Georgetown and started a chapter on her campus. So there's our first chapter model right there. After that is when Allison starts establishing it as an organization. And now, we've got hundreds upon hundreds of chapters on campuses around the country. But something I really do want to note is that, chapters is how Active Minds got started. But now we are an organization with, many different programs and brands even of tools and resources for mental health. So really our main guiding light, our mission is to mobilize youth and young adults around mental health, primarily in that 14 to 24 age range. And sometimes we go outside of it. We've got some programming for middle schools. Happy to include, a 25-year-old in college in our program. I think that's really where our sweet spot is mobilizing youth and young adults around mental health, whether that's at their schools or if it's in their communities too. I mean, we've got community programs. And so that's how I think where Active Minds really stands today. Well, although Active Minds is based in Washington, D.C., I'm based in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So I'm back near my family. I grew up in Green Bay. So I'm, not too far from them. And then Milwaukee's also where I went to college. But as you could hear from my journey, I lived around quite a bit, Indiana, Alabama, down south, Georgia. But now I'm back in my home state.
Oh, that's awesome. Active Minds is all over the nation, all over. So
Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly.
And so tell us about your role, senior manager of higher education. I mean, that's like, it really intertwines your love of mental health advocacy, your love for higher education, you relating with students and working on mental health conversations. So let's talk about your role there and how that got started.
Awesome. Yeah. First of all, I just want to pause and just recognize how truly blessed and fortunate I am that I get to, for my everyday job, help students do what I was trying to do on my campus, right? And not everybody, I feel like, gets to have a career or a job where they're investing in something that's so personal to them, and then seeing the dividends of what they've learned multiply.
Yeah.
And so I just know how lucky I am, I think, in that way.
Oh, I love that perspective.
Thanks. Yeah. So actually, when I first got to Active Minds, I was on the chapters team for about a year and then was promoted over to the senior manager of higher ed. And the role has also evolved in the 3-4 years I've been in this role, whether it's working with higher ed partners or working on specific grants, then also just working to get our programs into different types of colleges and universities, including community colleges, HBCUs, colleges where we didn't have a large presence for a long time, looking at how can Active Minds show up differently for different types of students and in different environments, especially when we think about the landscape behind higher ed and how different institution types are, the values, the different student types that they attract, and what they're trying to instill in their students, by graduation. And Active Minds support that when it comes to the mental health education of the student. 2 years ago now is when the Mental Health Advocacy Institute started. So this is really the main part of my role now here in the year 2026. Is running the Mental Health Advocacy Institute. It is a leadership program for college students across the United States. We are accepting 80 students into this next cohort, and they are paid to create a mental health advocacy action plan focusing on a specific issue on their campus, a mental health issue on their campus. And then in the spring semester, they implement their plan and try to get a policy updated or changed or implemented, a new program or service or resource, a mental health resource on their campus. And so we really are seeing some awesome projects in the Institute. It's ending its second year right now, and we're going into year 3. And then just seeing students from across the country, right? So that's the other piece to this. And I'd love to go into this a little more later, but
definitely,
I get to work with students from 80 different campuses across the country.
That's
at
so
the same
cool.
time. And so it's not just I'm on one campus seeing really what's going on in the culture and the environment and the climate on that campus, but I get to really think about, well, what's going on differently at Arizona State versus, Alabama State, knowing both of those are two very different institutions, and think about the different environments there, I think is so interesting. And I love, love, love understanding more and every day talking to students how advocacy plays out in these different institutions.
Yes. Wow, that's awesome. And you know why I think that that's so important is because higher education admin, they need to understand and listen to what students need. And so I think that this institute is saying, hey, we want to hear from the students. We want them to forge the path with this. Really, I really love that. And so that's really the core of the work that you do at Active Minds, that institute.
Yes, that has become my big project. I'm the program manager for the Institute, and I work alongside a wonderful program design team because this is a program that has, birthed from scratch in the past 2 years. Our other programs at Active Minds, which are wonderful programs, but our chapters program is really the foundation of the entire organization, right? Create an Active Minds chapter or organization on your campus, mobilize with this group of students. The Institute was really for students who are saying, I'm the only mental health advocate on my campus, or I'm wanting to do an advocacy project and bring my chapter along with me, but I'm confident in leading the charge to really change something on my campus in this specific focused way.
Yes.
And so it's really new. And so designing a program was a beast within itself. And now it's
Yes.
implementing and growing the program. And so I just feel so
Wow.
fortunate to be able to be one of the founders of this
Mhm.
program, and seeing it
Wow.
come to life now and sticking with
Yeah.
it has been just such a fulfilling opportunity.
Yeah, that's awesome. How did the conversation around mental health on college campuses evolve since Active Minds began? Like we kind of talked about, this is like a pivotal point really for these conversations, for this advocacy work, especially with the Institute and everything. So can we talk about like how that really evolved?
Sure. Now you're kind of keying into my like higher ed nerdiness. So we
Yeah.
could also go in here for a while. So stop me
Yeah.
if you're interested.
So this is like also channeling my nerdiness too.
Okay, great. Oh, great. Okay. I hope those listening are enjoying thus far and enjoyed it. But there's a lot of different ways, right? The conversation around mental health has changed, and what we're really advocating for and needing to advocate for has changed since
Yes.
2003. But here are some of the, kind of big things I would say that have evolved. The first would be, when we think about mental health and how in the conversations, I feel like we're doing less convincing of people to talk about
Okay.
mental health and more education on how people can talk about mental health. So
Yes.
I'd say there's less of, I don't want to talk about mental health. It's,
Hmm.
no, we need to talk about mental health, but people don't always feel equipped to have the conversation or know how to have that conversation with their peers and in different settings. And it's
Yeah.
more education on that front. So maybe like the second wave
Hmm.
of advocacy coming in here would
Oh,
be the
that's
first.
interesting.
And that's where our digital product A.S.K, I feel, is really helpful. It stands for
Yes.
Acknowledge, Support, Keep in Touch, and it's the stop, drop, and roll of emotional support. And you can find it, on the Active Minds website. We made it with MTV, and it's a tool that teaches you how do you, acknowledge how someone's feeling, and maybe the emotional
Hmm.
pieces at play in a conversation or in a situation. How do you offer support to that person? And then really it's about the genuine follow through. Keeping in touch with somebody that you just asked to be vulnerable with you is going to go a long way in terms of impacting the person receiving the emotional support.
Yeah, definitely. And I love talking about that and like how when we get into really helping people that are struggling, a
Mhm.
lot of people feel like, oh, I have to have all the answers, or they feel like, oh, I'm not a therapist, I'm not a counselor. I kind of don't come from that standpoint, but you don't have to be to just simply like be with someone, support someone, kind of like talk them through things. So yeah, so that's a great point to mention. And so people can look up, and I'll have it below the ask, the ask acronym or initiative. I'll have that definitely down below.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Yeah, I'd love that link in the show notes. The second thing that I think is really interesting about how the conversation around mental health has evolved, or mental health
Mhm.
advocacy has evolved since
Yeah.
the early 2000s, would be how we talk about stigma. So,
Mhm.
I think when I started Active Minds in 2012, not to date myself, but I just did, I was a student starting with Active Minds. The big word was stigma. What does stigma
Yeah.
mean? How does stigma affect mental health advocacy, and kind of try to stop mental health advocacy? How do we overcome stigma? How do we destigmatize mental health? And I think we're seeing a little less of that now.
Mhm.
Maybe that conversation around stigma coming up, but it's still there. And now I think we're starting to ask the question of, how does stigma show up for different groups of people?
Mhm.
Because we kind of had this one model of stigma for a while of, this is the ways mental health is
Mhm.
stigmatized and it stops people from seeking treatment. And I think though it was a one size fits all model, but now
Yeah.
we have to look at, how does stigma affect people of diverse identities? How does stigma affect people of color? How does stigma affect people in the LGBTQ plus community? Because one thing about stigma that's really interesting is that it tends to attack what matters most. So, as a white woman, I would experience stigma sometimes differently than maybe a person of color, where maybe as a woman, they might be like, oh, you have a mental health issue, you're really sensitive, right? But then maybe somebody else, because of their stereotypes on their identity, they might be coined as dangerous, or they might be coined as lazy, or they might be coined is not smart due to having a mental health issue. And that's the stigma that threatens their seeking treatment and their advocacy versus my own. And so kind of just recognizing stigma shows up in different ways for different groups of people. And then how do we combat that? And then how does self-stigma and community stigma stop people from getting treatment as well? Is it as much of what people are saying about you, or is it what you're saying about yourself? And so I think the nuances of stigma have evolved, and it's more on how do we combat stigma for populations where the access isn't easy. And there's multiple layers and barriers to that treatment and to education around mental health. And how does that show up differently? So I think it's those more nuanced conversations. Like, we have destigmatized mental health a lot, but it does still show up in underserved communities. And I think that's a really important thing to remember.
Yeah, definitely, for sure. What's something people often get wrong about supporting mental health that you wish more people understood?
So there's a few things. I'd say one thing that's prominent to my work is going to be that external factors like our environment and the social determinants of health have a really big influence on our mental health. And why that's important to me is because, again, I work with students on 80 different college campuses when I work with the Institute, but overall, hundreds of different college campuses. So you can see how the environment, different college institutions, different communities, how they affect somebody's mental health.
Yes.
Positive and negatively. It's not just a negative thing, it's also positive, right? So I think thinking about how our environment affects our mental health and where you choose to go to college, where you invest your time, what communities you pour into, or what organizations you join, those are all things, these external environments we put ourselves in, those are all things that have a really large influence on your mental health. Yeah, so that's one thing for sure.
Yeah, I totally agree, because I think this brings up an interesting conversation. I think when people hear the word mental health and they don't have really a full understanding of it, they think, oh, well, that's just in the mind, that's in some person's mind, but they don't realize the effect of the environment that they're in. So I want to talk about, especially the work that you're doing with students. You're really hands-on with them. You really see what's going on and in their environment, also what they're facing. When it comes to college student mental health, and I think why people pass it off is because they say, well, college is a stressful time. That's just what happens, really. And so why is that not really the answer to that? What I'm trying to say is, what are the biggest challenges that you see students facing that people really don't understand? And what is your message to them?
That's a great question. And I think no one can answer it better than the students, right? So I could give you my thoughts as somebody who was in college, some years back now, but we have data from our Mental Health Advocacy Institute that we talked about earlier of these are the issues that students identified in this most recent cohort. And these issues include underutilization of mental health programs and services that are available to students. Loneliness came up as a large issue, and we know that. Even the Trellis data that was released yesterday, over 50% of students reported feeling lonely. We know that loneliness continues to be a large problem amongst this age group. Are the services and programs made for different groups of people, or are they made for a very specific student on a campus? And do I feel seen as a student in the services, or do I feel like these services and programs aren't for me because of something in my identity? So that's going to be a large problem. Academic pressure and burnout is a huge problem. Are we giving students too much? How are we supporting students' mental health so they can graduate college successfully and do the homework and the assignments, get the internship, do the research we're asking them to do to get this degree? I would say are some of the bigger things.
Yeah, I mean, the first one you mentioned about like the resources are not being used. So like some campuses have the problem of they don't have enough resources or enough funding or things like that. But then the campuses that do, now that brings up with, oh, do students even know about it? Like, are they connected to their campus? Do they know where to go? Especially like a freshman who doesn't really know how to navigate campus. They don't know where to bring their friend if their friend is struggling. So they're not aware of where to go and seek help. That brings up a really interesting conversation. Like, are professors informing the students of where to go? Is the admin connected to the students? All of these different things kind of come into it. So 70% say that they don't know how to support someone struggling with their mental health. So how can people support a friend, family member, peer who's struggling, again, without feeling like they need to have all the answers, they need to be trained in this, etc.?
Sure. So that's when I'd go back to ask, which, we mentioned earlier is acknowledge, support, keep in touch. It's, again, think of it as like stop, drop, and roll, but for mental health. Right. So if you notice, oh man, this person might be struggling with their mental health, something's wrong, they seem off, then that is like if you notice you're on fire, you would stop, drop, and roll. If you notice there might be a mental health issue at play or somebody might be in distress. And again, not a crisis. This is not a crisis tool. This is a, wow, they look sad, they look down, they look frustrated. Something comes up and they're saying, my mental health isn't great. This would be an ask moment. And so that's acknowledging how they're feeling, offering support, and then that follow through of keeping in touch is going to be really important.
Right. Yeah, and I think people don't want to I think one thing I notice with people is they're like, "Oh, I kind of noticed my friend is off, but I don't really want to ask because, maybe they're just having one bad day or something." So that's kind of where they feel like they don't want to initiate because they're like, "Oh, I don't want to insult them or whatever." But no, it's not like that at all.
No, not at all. You should ask. People want to feel seen. And I
Yeah.
think that's what compounds back to that last question when we talk about issues we're seeing on college campuses, loneliness and isolation. You're going to feel more isolated if you're feeling down and no one
Yes,
bothers to notice that there's a failure to even bother to ask
for sure.
how
For
somebody is
sure.
doing. Yeah, I think asking can make a complete difference, even if they say, "Oh no, I'm fine," right? And there's
Hmm.
defensiveness. Of course, the Ask program that we have, the digital tool we have, teaches you kind of how to navigate those sorts of defense barriers and say and ask in a way that may make somebody less defensive. But even
Yes.
if that comes up, at least the person knows that you cared enough to notice and to ask.
Or even saying something like, "Oh, even if you're not ready to talk about it right now, if you ever do, I'm here. I'm here for sure, for sure." The theme of this show is hope, and so I always ask everyone about hope. And firstly, I want to hear about what role has hope played in your journey, and how do you hold on to that today?
So something I didn't mention in my journey, I think that really impacted me as a college student is my sophomore year, my father unexpectedly passed away while I was in college. I was
Oh, I'm
actually
so
listening
sorry.
to some episodes of this podcast to prepare for this interview, and I noticed the last guest also lost her father at a young age. So I was like, wow, I can
Yeah.
relate to this person. And I think that impacted my mental health. I mean, it still does impact my mental health, but that
Okay.
impacted my mental health a lot, especially as a college student. So not only was I freshly diagnosed with OCD a couple of years before that and was navigating now being an advocate, really getting
Hmm.
treatment in college, things like that. But then this like life event happens that tore apart my world, especially as like an only child. So it just ended up being me and my mom after that. Even through that experience where it felt like the whole world was coming to an end the night that he died, and even during that next year of my college experience, I
Hmm.
saw so much new life on the other side of that tragedy and even for my mental health, right? Like I learned how to be resilient against different situations and even how to empathize with people who are going through similar things or really tough things impacted their mental health. And I was able to advocate on my campus for students to be more literate in mental health. And hopefully that impacted them in ways when they came across a tough life situation, even if that situation wouldn't happen for another 10, 20 years. Like maybe they learned something in college because of the advocacy Active Minds did that will impact them years down the road. And so I think that's where I see hope in a lot of ways. And that's where I see hope through the Institute students too, is now not only did I make an impact as a college student and got told that by, my peers, I still have people who I bump into that I went to college with 10 years ago who are like,
Really?
hey, you were such an advocate. Thank you for everything you did around mental health.
That's
And I
amazing.
got help because of you. Yeah. Oh,
Oh
yeah.
my gosh, that's the best. That's the best feeling in the world.
It is, and that's where I see hope because I'm like, I look back at that time in my life and I'm like, I
Yeah.
was struggling. Oh my God, was I struggling with loss and grief and
Mm,
OCD? But yet I was able to have an impact on my peers, even when things weren't
mm,
perfect in my life. But
mm.
now I see this new generation of college students doing the same thing and impacting on grandiose levels that I didn't
Yeah.
even get to. I mean, establishing peer support programs, establishing policy, publishing mental health information on these big campus
Yeah.
owned resources as sophomores, juniors, seniors in school. It's incredible. And so I see so much hope when I see a student be able to take their own journey and their own story and their own pain and
Mm,
their own resilience and translate that into action. That
mm.
is what I
Wow.
see. And that I think is where we all give hope to each other.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, Marky, firstly, I'm so sorry to hear about that. And, it really sounds like you've taken all of this pain that you've experienced, these experiences you've had that are difficult, that were so challenging. I can't even imagine what you went through at that time. Again, you never know what someone wakes up the next day and they go through last night. You never know.
Yeah.
And so for you to take all of that you went through and like fuel that into your purpose, I mean, thank you for doing that because it's helping so many people. Like you said, we never know how many people it's really affecting. So this has been truly amazing. And kind of the last question, I never really asked this one before, but given the context of what we're talking about in Mental Health Awareness Month, what does hope look like in the context of mental health, especially if someone's kind of in that dark, difficult season, really? Mostly when I talk with guests, we're kind of reflecting like this happened and hope kind of came after that. But I really want to give something to someone who's listening, who's maybe in that season right now.
What comes to mind right away is this is from a couple of years ago, but if you've ever
Yeah.
used Headspace, they have one of their
Yeah.
like free little meditation things is about the blue sky. And it's the idea that, you know, you might be going through something and there's these gray clouds and there's all this rain and this lightning coming down, but behind those gray clouds, there's always blue sky. The sky was there the whole time. You were just being impacted by the clouds. And so I would say that to somebody who is struggling with hope right now is that there are a lot of clouds in your sky and they are real. You're not imagining the clouds. The clouds are valid. You know, acknowledge the clouds, right? For
Yes.
purposes. But know that
Acknowledge
there's
it.
always a blue sky there and that the clouds will clear away, would be, I think, my message of hope. The
Yeah.
clouds will clear away. The sky will be blue again. And it's hard because we don't know when and we don't know how, but we know it will.
I think that's really where the hope kind of like lies. Exactly. I really love also, thank you for sharing that, Markie. And, you know, thank you for sharing everything today. And I'm so happy to hear about your work with Active Minds, how it's really like truly impacting people. I mean, it's just incredible. And, you know, I also want to just go back to when I asked you the other question about hope. I love how your definition of hope is like giving back to others, really taking really the painful experiences and now going on and helping others and being like, hey, I know about these challenges. I want to make it better for other people. Doing that advocacy work, everything that all comes into hope. So it's really life changing. It truly is. It's so inspiring. And it's like when you see people like you and like all these students that are making a difference, it's like, wow, you know, you really want to be like, that's amazing. I truly love it.
Thank you so much.
It is. And that's what Active Minds is doing. These are real people who are going through real things that so many people go through and they're hiding maybe in themselves and they don't want to share or they're not ready to share. But here are people that are openly sharing. And so you can feel less alone in that. And I think everyone's carrying something, you know. And so at some point in their life, at some stage and age, someone's going to experience something that's difficult. And, you know, there are always going to be those clouds, like we said. And so knowing that people are here sharing, I mean, it really makes people feel less alone. It really does. Because they're like, wait, I didn't know how to put that into words. Or like you even said in the beginning, like you knew something was wrong, but you didn't know it was affecting your mental health. You didn't know the word for it, really.
Yep.
And I think a lot of people, they don't even know the word for it. They're just like, hey, something's wrong. I don't feel right. So this is so impactful. And I totally agree with what you said. Is there anything else about the Institute you wanted to talk about? I know you said you wanted to wrap back around with that. Is there anything you wanted?
I want to know
I
about
know.
the Institute.
I know. It's really great. I'm so excited about this. That's amazing. I'm so happy we talked about it. When's the deadline that people really typically apply?
Great question, Stephanie. And I'm so happy you asked. Applications for next year, everyone listening to this podcast, if you're a college student, they'll be open till
June 7th, 2026. Perfect. So people can apply. That's awesome.
Yes.
That's
Can you put a
amazing.
link in the show notes to the application?
I definitely will. I definitely want to tell us. So what?
I'm
Wait, this is
invested
perfect.
forever.
And this is perfect because it's like around Mental Health Awareness Month. So this is perfect.
Yeah.
Even though society should have focus every single day on mental health, really May is like where we start to realize, hey, okay, we start to focus on this even more and highlight it, the importance of it. That's awesome. I know you could talk about that. We could talk about this the whole episode.
Full time.
It's so interesting. Oh, I love this. And so tell people that are maybe interested in applying a little bit about what they would be doing in the application.
Sure. Okay. So really our application, I'd say a two-pronged application where not only do we want to get a sense of who you are, but we also really value students getting a sense of what the program is so they know that this is a right fit for them. So a lot of these questions that we ask, we have some essay questions on the application. We have demographic information, of course. We have just questions about leadership experience in school and things like that. But really, we just want to make sure that if you're going to dedicate a year of your life to this program, that you're getting out of it what you hope to, that it's going to contribute to the professional experience and the advocacy experience that you're wanting it to, and not say, oh, this is not what I signed up for, right? So I always think it's about fit. It's not about, being good enough per se.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
anyone applying, I want you out there to know, like, we're really trying to look for folks who are a good fit for the program, to make
Mhm.
sure we're not wasting your time,
Yeah.
and that you're getting the biggest return on investment you possibly can. And
Yeah.
so that's really where the application centered around, Stephanie, is
Mm.
understanding what's your experience with like leadership and some of the foundational skills you'll need to be successful in this program, and wanting to learn about advocacy.
Mm.
This probably would not be a good program for somebody who just says, "Hey, I'm really interested in learning how to become a therapist, and that's my
Okay.
sole thing. I'm not really interested in changing policy or advocacy.
Okay.
I just want to, learn how to talk to people about mental health." We have
Okay.
wonderful programs for active minds that can teach you the skills to talk about mental health
Mhm.
with others. But this one's going to require more of your time and some
Right.
big steps to mobilizing. And so we're really looking for those students who are saying, "I want to change something on my campus."
Mm. That's so interesting. And this is the second year that this program's being run?
It'll be the third that we're
The
getting
third year.
applications
Okay.
for. Yeah.
That's awesome. And can you
Sure.
give some kind of broad examples of what students have kind of brought to their campuses?
110%.
Yes.
First, we've got students who are trying to jump in on the push for putting crisis numbers and counseling numbers
Oh,
on
yes.
IDs. We have a
Wow.
lot happening around that federally coming up in this month
Mhm.
here. But one of our students got her school to put the information on the mobile IDs. So that's a big thing coming up next
Right.
too, is we're seeing less of these physical ID cards now, and we're seeing more on the phone. And so at the
Yes.
bottom of
Yes.
the ID, can we have those numbers there where you click and it will come
Yes.
right away? And that's accessible to
Yes.
any student.
Like 988 and those numbers, like the crisis hotline and things like that. Yes.
Yep, or even just a counseling center crisis number too. So
Yes.
988
Yeah.
for sure, and sometimes a secondary number of, here's a
Mhm.
campus number, right, that you can call.
Definitely.
Um,
Definitely. Wow, that's so important. That's so neat. And like you said, even though people could look it up, it's more of like people don't know to look it up. And like when you're struggling, you don't think to look it up. You're more like you need it there already. So it's like when you're struggling, it's right there. That's important. Yeah.
Yep, because when we're really in a crisis mode, right, we really get tunnel
Mhm.
visioned, and we're
Mhm.
going to need things more accessible versus it's harder to think outside the box and reach
Yes.
out, than having something right there. And I think something that student IDs and a couple of our other strategies get at as
Mhm.
well are accessibility to all students. So,
Mm.
you don't need to be the most involved student in every organization, taking the hardest classes to get a student ID. You just need to be a
Mhm.
student. Because
Mhm.
we know a lot of our students who know about the mental health resources are the
Right.
really involved ones. But then we have to ask ourselves some questions around equity. Who has time to be very involved? Who has the money to not be working a couple on campus jobs in order to be involved with all these organizations?
Mhm.
Who has the money to live on campus and get access to people, in the residence halls and things like that, right? So
Right.
when we think about equity and who's getting mental health education and resources and information, having that number on an ID is going to equal the playing field for a lot of students.
Oh, definitely. That's incredible. And that's just one of like so many initiatives that
Yep.
students are leading, and it can be unique to their campus. So whatever the student knows, like, hey, maybe they're talking to their friend, they're like, hey, this is really missing, and then they apply to the institute, and then they can start making change on their campus. So that's
Exactly.
incredible. Yeah,
That's
and I
the
mean, I
goal.
love how like so the school. This is just my like question. So the
Mhm.
school has to abide by this program. Basically, is that right?
No, not exactly. So
Okay.
the student applies
Oh, the student applies. Oh,
themselves.
okay.
So if there's a college student listening right now,
Yes.
we take sophomores through graduate students. We
Yes.
we believe that first year students would have a tough time knowing everybody they need to
Mhm.
know and
Yes.
work around some of the bureaucracy on campuses in order
Mhm.
to implement something. So
Yeah.
there's a sophomore through graduate student listening right now. He's like, "I'd really like to do this." You can apply
Mhm.
yourself. One of the first sessions
Oh,
we
great.
do with students is how to get a steering committee together on your campus.
Oh, well, that's
You
cool.
Yeah, how you recruit people on your campus to be on your steering committee, and then you come up with a problem to address with your steering committee. This isn't just
Mhm.
you saying, "I really think the problem at Marquette University is
Yes.
blank." Right? Yeah, you want a diverse amount of staff members, maybe a faculty member, maybe other students on your steering committee to say,
Yeah.
"I see this. Well, I see this from this angle." And then you can really come up with an issue statement, an
Yes.
issue profile for a particular problem,
Mhm.
really understand it before prescribing a strategy to address it.
Yeah, that sounds really great. And I think rather than just one person, you want to hear everyone's voice. Like when I worked in higher education, we had a committee. It was like our well-being committee, and I was co-leading that. And it was like faculty, it was staff, it was graduate students. You want to hear all different people's perspectives. You want everyone to have a say in it and see what's best. You want to kind of do like almost like a focus group kind of thing. Like you want to hear what works. Yeah, like that's awesome. Yeah, I really like that.
There's more
Yeah.
publishing mental health information
Hmm.
projects out there. A big thing that's really becoming popular is
Hmm.
putting mental health and wellness information on Canvas or on the
Yes.
student portal. So we've had a lot of students
Mm.
do that in the Institute saying, we want a suite of mental health information and resources listed right on my student portal, right on my Canvas page or learning management system. So I know
Right.
again where this lives and what's available, because we are seeing a lot of mental health programs and services go outside the counseling center and live in these other
Yes.
parts of higher education, and then students don't always know what's all available or where they are. So that's
Yes.
a great strategy. We also have students starting different groups, peer support groups for specific
Mm.
types of students. We have a student this year at Brown is starting a co-peer response program where a peer would
Mm.
come with EMS to a situation if you opted into having somebody your age come with EMS to be with you during that time of crisis. So that's called co-peer response.
Yes.
Yeah,
Oh, can I just ask can you just tell people what EMS is just in case they don't?
just like emergency services.
Yes. Okay.
Yep.
Perfect.
And then we've got students impacting curriculum. We had a
Yes.
student last year at Mississippi State who made a eating disorder and mindful
Wow.
eating workshop in tandem with her health and wellness center and nutritionists on campus and her nutrition program. And her and their VP of wellness or student affairs got in touch with me this year and let me know that they were putting her information into their curriculum, their health and wellness
Wow.
curriculum. So it's going to reach almost 2,000 students.
Wow. That's awesome.
So that's just, some of the impact that our students are having, from publishing mental health information to starting groups to impacting curriculum.
I mean, you're really looking through these, you're really pouring over them and you really want to help these students. Like if someone's sitting here right now listening and they're like, hey, I have this great idea. I don't know what to do with it. Like, I don't know how to start, apply to this. We'll talk about it with people, get their feedback, see like, oh, what would work? What are they really looking for? What do they wish they had on campus? Yeah, that's really awesome. I love hearing about that, Markie. I can
Yeah.
definitely tell this is your passion.
This is
And I think, I just wanted to also add to talk about the timing of your role. I mean, there is literally not a more perfect time. And this is just so timely, it's so needed, this role about, because of everything that we see, like student mental health is a huge passion of mine as well. So I know that we relate on that. I love talking about it. Again, I know how mental health is really spanning all generations, but I know how with students, particularly the unique struggles that they face and the timing that they're going through, everything that they're facing, like with how expensive college is nowadays, the economic troubles, everything. It's just like all at once, the pressures, or the job market that they're facing. It's really everything is just falling on the backs of college students, are feeling that from everyone that I talk to. And so it's just so needed. This role, this work you're doing is just so important.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
And so this has been great, Markie. I really enjoy this conversation. Hope makes people feel less alone. And that's what Active Minds is doing. And that's what you're doing. So thank you so much, Markie. This has been so amazing and incredible. I love this. Again, I'm also like a nerd with this sense too. So I love talking about this.
Okay, we can
Thank
chat
you.
offline about higher ed, mental health,
I
or
know this is amazing. Oh, I love this. I love Thank you, Marky. And everyone listening, have a great rest of your day. I'm also going to share resources below that you can access from Active Minds and also from the Institute as well. And again, if you're interested in applying, please go check out the link. This will be out when it's the application link is open. So you definitely check that out and see if you are interested in applying. So that's awesome. So thank you, Marky, and everyone.
thanks, Stephanie.